Good morning, church. Come on, let's stand on our feet. This morning, we are so thankful you guys are here in the house of God. It is a good day. Let's sing. I was buried beneath my shame. Come on, we sing. Who can carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb, we sing. It was my tomb. Come on, we lift this up till I met you. Till I met you, and I was breathing but not alive. Come on, we sing all my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb. It was my tomb. Yeah, yeah. Till I met you. Come on, we lift this up, we sing. You called my name, then I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the Jesus, when I met you, you called my name. When you called my name, then I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. Into your glorious day, Jesus. We thank you, Jesus. Come on, we lift this up this morning. I needed rescue. I needed rescue. My sin was heavy. Chains break at the weight of your glory. I need a shelter. I was an orphan. You called me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future. My eyes are open. When you call my name, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. feel free this morning. Can we lift our hands as we sing? Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Oh, nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Jesus. Come on, we sing, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness. That's right. Failures and flaws, Lord, you see them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause He's the God of the mountain. He's the God of the mountain. He is the God of the valley. He is the God of the valley. There's not a place your mercy and grace will find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. We believe there's nothing. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. 'Cause He's the God of the mountain. He's the God of the breakthrough. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one. Come on, we believe that this morning when you turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Oh, nothing is. Come on, do you believe that this morning that there is nothing higher, nothing greater? We sing. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing, Jesus, better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only Can we raise our hands this morning as we believe? Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Oh, nothing is better than you.
All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire. Darkest night, you are close like no other. I've known you as a father, I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is so, so good.
Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God.
Well, good morning. You guys can have a seat. As I woke up this morning, my name is Dan. I'm the student pastor here at Christ Church. I don't know if you know that. My name's Dan. I woke up this morning, and it is one of those mornings and one of those weeks where I was like, my bed looks amazing. You ever have that where like the sheets just feel good? You have the perfect amount of blankets. I'm the perfect warmth. I'm warm. It's kind of cold in my room. It was good. But obviously I got up and we got here. And I'm so thankful that you guys are here because nothing can beat worshiping together and being together as followers of Jesus. It just, not only like worshiping God, but it just does things to my heart. It does things to my attitude. And so, man, we as a staff, we are so thankful that you guys are here to worship with us. I appreciate you. It does things to my heart and to my attitude and my walk with Jesus. So we're thankful for that. Man, if this is your first time here this morning or your second and you just haven't really filled anything out or let us know you're here, we would love to connect with you. We would love to get to know you. And it's super, super easy. You can take out your phone and you can actually just scan that QR code right in the back of your seat, and you can fill that out. It just lets us know you're here. It lets us know who you are, and we can get to know you, and then we can help you get to know us as a church. Another super, super easy way to do that is to actually, after worship this morning, you can go right out and to the right to what we call Connection Point, and we actually have 10 after is what we call that. And there's some awesome volunteers down there who would love to meet you, would love to get to know you, would love to, again, help you get to know our church. And then John will actually be down there for a little while as well, and you can get to know him and hear just the mission and vision of why we do what we do at Christ Church. Again, that's called 10 after, and that is right after service, right to the right. Like I said, I'm the student pastor, which means my job is fun because sometimes the words, what if we, are just amazing, and they come up with great ideas. So we as a team have actually come up with an idea that gets me like, I don't know if you can tell, God made me to be a student pastor and work with our 6th, 12th graders. We came up with an idea that just gets me like wanting to like, oh boy, like my heart pounds. So in a week and a half, that's April 28th, on a Wednesday night, we do Chaos on Wednesday nights, that's our student ministry. We're gonna have our first ever splatter room. And I am like going off the walls excited about this. It's for all our 6th to 12th graders. We're basically going to come, we're going to have a great night of worship, and we're going to open God's Word together. We're going to have an amazing night. I think God's going to do some really cool stuff in students' hearts. And then we're going to exit this room, and we're going to go out to like our homemade splatter rooms where we're going to let students just suit up, put on some goggles, put on a poncho, and they're going to go into these rooms, and they're going to have a canvas that says Chaos and has a verse, and they're just going to take paint, and they're just going to throw it. And they're just going to just throw it everywhere. They're going to go bonkers. And the beautiful thing of it is these people make washable paint. So if you're a parent and you're already putting your head in your hands like Daniel, I'm like, don't worry, it washes off. And then they can take that home. I don't know. We already did a little practice run with it and like threw it everywhere. And it just like, I'm excited. I think it's going to be an amazing night for our students. I think God's going to do some awesome stuff in worship and opening His Word. And I think that we can see Him do some really cool stuff in our students in the Camden County. So listen, if you have a 6th to 12th grader, if you know a 6th to 12th grader, if you like have vaguely heard of one who lives somewhere near you, you let them know that April 28th at 6:45, it's going down here at Chaos, all right? If you have any questions, come let me know. This also means that if you're an adult, you're not a 6th to 12th grader, and you're like, darn, I can't throw paint. Listen, we need all hands on deck for this. I would love to have your help as a volunteer. We would love to get you put somewhere to help us run this awesome night that is going to be a little bit crazy. And so the more adults who aren't crazy, the better. Because I tend to go a little bit crazy, and so I need adults to look at me and go, Dan, chill. And I'll be like, all right, I'm sorry. So if that is you, we would love to have your help with that as well. Even if that's not you, if you're like, don't put me near a 6th to 12th grader, listen, I want you to know that you are a part of this. At Christ Church, everything we do, from our kids, from our groups to our students, it's because of you guys as a team. Whether you're like, Dan, I've never volunteered. Listen, because of your generosity, we get to do things like this. because of your generosity, we get to have nights like this where hopefully we can see hundreds of students come in and they can hear God's word and they can leave knowing someone loves them and cares about them. They are valuable. There's a God who created them and loves them. And that's our goal. And that can happen because of you, even if you never step foot at Chaos on a Wednesday night. So listen, it's because of your generosity. And I want to say thank you for that. Thank you. Because of that, we get to be generous as a church. If you'd like to partner with us in generosity today, you can do it super easy. Again, there's a QR code right in the back of the seat, or if you have something in your hand, there's some boxes in the back. We are so thankful that we get to reach our county, the disconnected and the unfulfilled, for Jesus Christ because of you. I want to take a minute and pray here before we keep going with our morning. God, thank you for your church right here. Thank you that we get to worship you together this morning, Lord. Thank you that we get to open your word, we get to learn, we get to grow. And Lord, I pray that each and every person here this morning, Lord, we can walk out of this room together more in love with our Creator, more in love with our Savior, and more ready to follow you in our next step in our walk with you. And Lord, I pray that we, Christ Church, we can leave this building, Lord, and this week we can be your church on Monday and Tuesday at our jobs, at our schools, at our homes, Lord, and we can see your gospel do amazing things in Camden County. We love you. In your name, amen.
Well, good morning, everybody. How we doing? Are we good? Oh, boy. All right, we got work to do. Hey, maybe just, hey, there's a lot of us in here today. You know, it feels pretty good, doesn't it, for some of you? Some of you are like, okay, this is why I haven't come back yet. There's too many people in here. But glad you guys are here today. Hey, if there's somebody close to you and we didn't get a chance to high five or hug, just give them a fist bump and say, hey, I'm glad that you're here today. And we'll jump in. Hey, while you're doing that, it's always a good reminder that there are a whole bunch of people who are watching online, and so we may be their church because they can't be here in Camden County, or they may be in bed watching, but we're glad you guys have tuned in today as well. So would you guys welcome them in today? Thank you guys for joining us. Yeah. Hey, my name's John, and I'm one of the pastors here, and I'm going to jump in today. We're looking at the Sermon on the Mount, which is the longest recorded teaching we have of Jesus in the Scriptures. We're working our way through it from the very beginning to the end, and it covers 3 chapters in the New Testament. So if you open up your Bible to the middle, turn to the right as soon as you come to Jesus, Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7. And Jesus, just to bring us all up to speed, Jesus in this sermon is inviting people into a whole new way of living with each other and living with God, and he just calls it the kingdom of Jesus. And so let me just say at the very beginning today, as we jump into this next section, that if our world could just, in some way, just grasp what it is that I'm going to teach us today, it is so needed right now. You're going to see this. It's so simple. I won't even have to say any specific names today. I won't have to even point us towards any cities. I won't have to acknowledge any events that are happening in our world today. You're going to know it, and hopefully you're going to see it in your own life this morning. And so last week we asked this question, and it's going to guide us for the next several weeks going forward. And the question is just simply this: who is a good person? I mean, who's a good person, and how do you know if you're living a good life? And so Jesus uses this very specific word to describe what was necessary to live that way. We looked at this last week. The word he said was righteousness. You're going to have to be righteous people. You're going to have a righteousness that's better than anybody else that's ever existed when it comes to being right. And he uses this Greek word, and the Greek word was dikaiosune, okay? Dikaiosune, we're going to talk about it going forward, but it just simply means what it is that makes a person truly right or good. So when your inside life, like the true you, when your inside life is as it should be, you have righteousness, that you essentially are the good person. Now, people listening to Jesus on the hillside and those of us who are listening to him now have to understand there are really only 2 approaches, right? 2 ways to actually live your life. And one of those was the way people had always heard about it before. It's a kind of righteousness that's all about what people see, like how you appear, the image that you actually portray to people, like the public version of you. And if you follow all of the rules and do everything right and go to the places at the right time and say the right things, everybody thought you must just really be a good person, and it didn't really care about what was in your heart. It was all about trying really, really hard to be better, to maybe even force yourself to kind of toe the line. And a lot of us have experienced that. Like a lot of us grew up in that, or we came from that recently and we walked away from it because that version of what we would call righteousness actually had the very opposite effect on us than it was intended to. The whole other way to do it is the Jesus kind of righteousness, where we listen, where we watch, where we follow him, and he says, okay, I will show you how to actually live a good life. And then over time, we're actually growing to become this kind of person, right? It's through faith, we talked about last week, through your belief in Jesus. He writes his law and his truth, not in a book or on a wall somewhere or a list of rules. He writes his truth in our hearts, and he puts his righteousness in us, right? And then out of that, the overflow of all that, we live a whole new way. So you are living, right? You're living your life with the heart of a king, essentially. And over time, you're becoming and growing to be this good person. And so therefore, we actually obey God, or we follow God's truths, because we're becoming these good people that his life in us is flowing out of us. So he's actually changing us. We're not trying harder or just saying, today I'm going to be a better person. It's his life in us that's helping us to make changes. And so again, here's the question that we're going to ask over the next several weeks. What would the good person do? Right? What would the good person do who lives in the kingdom of Jesus with this heart of the king? And Jesus is going to give us 6 real-life examples or circumstances or situations, things that you and I are going to face in a normal, everyday life, and then he's going to show us how all this works, okay? So this is the book of Matthew chapter 5, and what he's going to do is he's going to tell us the old way, and then he's going to talk about the response that we could have if Jesus was the king of our heart. So here's the very first one, Matthew chapter 5, verse 21. He says, you have heard, okay, so here's the old way, that it was said to our ancestors, do not murder. And whoever murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, okay, here's the new way, everyone who's angry with his brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Whoever insults his brother or sister will be subject to the court. Whoever says you fool will be subject to hellfire. Who thinks this is probably pretty important to understand what Jesus is saying? I mean, it's pretty important, okay? So that's today. That's what we're going to look at today. But listen, I am committed to you and I hearing every word of the sermon. And so I want to finish out the thought. Jesus expands this situation in verse 23. He says, so if you're offering your gift on the altar, and there you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled with your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Reach a settlement quickly with your adversary while you're on your way with him to the court, or your adversary will hand you over to the judge to the officer, and you'll be thrown into prison. That sounds important too. Truly, I tell you, you'll never get out of there until you have paid the last penny. So what I want to do is look at verse 21 and 22, and I want to look closer at those 4 words that Jesus just kind of showed us a progression with. Murder, anger, insults, and then the word fool, all right? It's going to be fun. Here we go. Matthew chapter 5, verse 21. You have heard that it was said to our ancestors, do not murder, and whoever murders will be subject to judgment. Now, everybody standing on the hillside would go, oh yeah, we heard that one. We've heard that one our whole life, you know? Hey, we know that one. Murder, it's a big one. Matter of fact, you go all the way back to Exodus where God's giving the commandments or the law to Moses, and there's 10 really, really big ones, right? Well, murder's one of those 10. Murder, and I think we all probably understand what this is when you deliberately choose, like you make a decision, it's deliberate to take someone's life. And every time you read one of God's commands, you have to understand that God has given us these laws or these commands for our protection, but also for our provision. And that's the case when it comes to murder, right? It's a command based on the fact that God is the one who has created man And if you don't understand that or you don't accept that, then it doesn't really matter what you do after that. But it has to start with this basic belief that God created man, that God breathed his own life into that man, that God placed his image. There's something about God that gets placed inside of the soul of every man and woman. God placed his image in us, and then that man became a living soul. So you would say God actually authored man's life, and therefore when you take that life from someone, you have usurped the authority of God. So that's our whole basis for what we're talking about here, right? That every life is actually valuable because God created it. And so there's this heart and there's this motive of God to preserve life, right? We want to protect that. And then there's also a protection for you and I, right? That this law says, I'm going to protect you from all of the people around you who want to be your judge. And there's a lot of, you got a long list of people who are like, okay, I would like to be your judge and handle this situation. And God's going, no, we need a law in place to protect you from those kinds of people. That no one, and this is the bottom line, no one but God has the right or the authority to decide when a person lives or dies. So, could we just agree at a minimum, before we even go forward today, that the world would be a whole much better place if we just got that right? I mean, can we agree on that one? I'm going to need a little bit more input because I'm not sure we all agree on that one. No. I'm not sure we all agree on that one, and that actually bothers me because I didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about murder. I think we need to talk about anger, okay? You just think about what's happening in our country right now, okay? And if you're under a rock somewhere, you don't know this, but I actually came across an article on CNN, doesn't matter what you think about them, just last week that said that major American cities saw a 33% increase in homicides last year. Only 2 cities say they didn't see anything happening, and one of them I don't believe, okay? And one of them is Raleigh, North Carolina. Congratulations, I actually believe that one. But I had to steal a couple of lines from the article to share with you. And here's what they wrote in the article. It says, you see if this is true or not. It's nearly impossible to attribute any year-to-year change in violent crime statistics to any single factor. And here's how the rest of it goes. Experts, whoever they are, point to a perfect storm of factors. Economic collapse, social anxiety because of a pandemic, depolicing in major cities after protests that called for the abolition of police departments, shifts in police resources from neighborhoods to downtown areas because of those protests, and the release of criminal defendants pre-trial. I didn't even know this stuff was contributing to anything, okay? Or pre-trial before sentences were completed to reduce risk of COVID-19 spread in jails. All may have contributed to the spike in homicides. Let me clear it up for you very, very quickly, okay? And Jesus is going to do it for us in the very next sentence. To say that we don't know what attributed to this is just ridiculous. And it's not a vote. It's not an election. It's nothing about that. Jesus is going to explain it for us, but he's going to have to dig a little bit deeper. He's saying that there's an old way to do things that is concerned about this. Just don't murder or you're going to get in trouble. Like it was the minimum, okay? And then we still couldn't handle that one. As long as you never killed anyone, right? You must be a good person. And we all know that's not true, don't we? Because you know a bunch of people, some of you are those people who haven't killed anyone, but we're still terrible people. That was funny, and it's because you know these, listen, you know these people, you work with them, you live by them, you go to school with them, they didn't kill anybody, they're still terrible. Jesus is going to shed light on the heart of the whole thing. He's going to say, there's an external act over here, but then there's this whole other thing of the internal posture. Don't murder. Some of you need to start here, I get that, but let's go back to something deeper, to the core of a person. And Jesus says this, 22, but I tell you, whole new standard, everyone who's angry with his brother or sister will be subject to judgment. All right, I got a new spin for you, but the interesting thing to me is when you read that, Jesus says, same word to describe the result for murder or anger, judgment. And what Jesus is going to do is to connect the dots to the deeper issues behind murder, which are fascinating. That when you actually kill a person, or you got to think about it this way today, when you actually kill a relationship with your anger, you do exactly what we just talked about. You actually take away God's right to measure the worth of a person. Let me show you how all this plays out. It's been quite life-changing for me. I have a lot to practice on. But anger in itself is neither a good thing nor a bad thing. That, like heat, right, on your stove to your hand, when you touch it, you have a spontaneous response. All right, I feel something and I need to react to it, right? Anger is a spontaneous response. That's what it is. Anger alerts us to an obstruction of our will. You have to grasp this. There's an alarm, right, a resistance. And we experience anger before we really have time to even think about it. Now, on the one hand, and some of you are already there, sometimes anger is the right thing to do. And I would say sometimes, okay? And everybody loves this version of Jesus, right? The one where Jesus walks into the temple and he looks around and he goes, oh, this is my Father's house, and you're actually preventing people from getting closer and having access to God. And he looks around and he goes, okay, I'll be back. And then he goes and he makes a whip, and then he comes back and he starts, wailing his whip, and he's kicking tables over, and he's going, get out, and he's telling people to leave. And there is some stuff that you and I should probably be a little bit more angry about, to be honest with you. But the Bible prescription here throughout the whole thing is anger is not the same thing as sin. And some of us grew up our whole life going, yeah, I'm not supposed to get mad, and if I get angry, then that's a sin. The Bible does not say that. But when you're angry, it sure is easy to sin, isn't it? There's an anger that actually moves us to restore things that are right. That's one possibility. We're going to go the other way. I like this statement from Dr. Henry Cloud, who's a Christian psychologist, that brings a lot more clarity to me. He says it this way. He says that anger is frustration at the fact that we are not God, and we do not have control over reality. It's this, right? I'm right, and I know I'm right. I'm right. Like, my wife says I've been wrong before, but I'm right, okay? I'm right. I have a desire. I want something to happen. I have a will, right? I have something that I want, and you disrespected me, and you got in my way. And it can range from this low-grade resentment to like this addiction to the rush and the feeling, like I only feel alive when the anger is pumping. Now, let's talk about other people for a second. Read social media if you want to, and you're quickly going to find someone who's angry. You stopped me, and I can't get my way, right? There's something that I think I'm right about, and it's not happening the way that I want it to. It could be a social justice issue. It could be the referees made a really terrible call, right? You messed up my order in the drive-thru. It feels protective for a lot of us, right? It feels like I'm protecting something, but buried underneath is often sadness and shame and a whole lot of hurt. Anger, we would say, when it is indulged instead of waved, right? I bring it in instead of let it go. It has an element of self-righteousness to it. You find somebody who has some anger going on in their life, you will likely find someone with a wounded ego. Anger, right, begins spontaneous, and then we choose to actively receive it instead of turn it away. I'm gonna receive this anger, and now I'm gonna do something with it, all right? What am I gonna do with it? I mean, we've heard of secondhand smoke before. What about secondhand anger? See, this is why some of you, you fired off at the car in front of you on the way here this morning, okay? This is why you have likely in your life made an innocent comment to one of your really good friends, and they exploded back on you, and your thought was, wow, that was not worth the response that they just had, was it? Here's what happened, right? You or they were already carrying a supply of anger, and then something happened that got in the way of what you wanted. I will act on my anger, or we could even say rage. I will act on my rage when I can justify, so important, when I can justify my mistreatment or my need to rectify a wrong. And you can see where it gets a little tricky now. You interfered with me. I move to a desire to actually harm you. So there's some degree of anger that's found in contempt. We'll get there in a second. And malice, we'll finish with that one, which is why someone's anger towards you, it really hurts, doesn't it? And it might be that the way they look at you, or it might be that they refuse to look at you. It might be that they raise their voice at you, or it might be that they refuse to speak to you. They made a painful impression on us, didn't they? Somebody hurts you, or somebody interferes with you, or doesn't. How about this? They didn't do what they promised, and it produced some anger inside of me. It was even their choices, right? And you didn't even get a say in it. It can produce some anger in you. Anger motivates us, and sometimes we restore what is right, but more often than not, we go the other direction and we don't. By the way, this part's for free. Even when anger is not acted on, like you don't respond in any way, it can't be hidden. Anger poisons the world. You keep it alive, right? And we remind ourselves how wrong we were. And when we do that, it touches everyone and it touches on absolutely everything. So anger, when we embrace it, leads us to have anger that we would call is indulged, it gets harbored, and then it gets expressed. What we're seeing in our world right now, and I'm not even referring to any one particular thing, is that when nothing seems to be done, hey, why aren't they doing anything about that? Why isn't somebody addressing this? Or it's not being done in the way that we want. You think about, man, I'm not getting my way when it comes to injustice. Our anger builds and then it breaks. And it's the same pattern, whether it's with your friend, it's the same pattern that happens in families, and it's the pattern that's happening in our country. Now, if you thought that was fun, Jesus takes it up a whole nother level, okay? There's multiple levels to what Jesus is getting at here. And he says this, verse 22, whoever insults his brother or sister will be subject to the court. Now, your Bible may actually have the word in there, raka, R-A-C-A. That might be what your word says right there. My version, and I've been using the CSB, the Christian Standard Bible, for a long time. It's what the notes are. My version chose to give a definition rather than to put that word in there. And here's what it means. Raka is an Aramaic word, which would have been like the local language of Israel. It is an expression of contempt. If that doesn't mean much to you, the word raka actually got formed from the sound. Okay, and what I mean by that is the sound when you are clearing your throat so that you can spit on someone. Raka. I'm not making it up. I don't make these things up, people, all right? Raka. You can all try it if you want to. Just clear one, get a big one going, and it's like, I want to spit in someone's face. I despise you to the point that I could actually spit in your face because you don't matter and you're not worth caring about. You're nothing. You are the lowest form of human life on the planet, and I want to hurt you. Jesus says when you get to that point, you're subject to the court, or it's religious court called the Sanhedrin, the highest court in the land. There's actually a law on the books about this very thing. I don't care if I hurt you or not, you're not worth caring about. That's raka. That's the insult we're talking about. And it's about to get really, really interesting, and I would even consider it to be life-changing over the next few minutes. For some of us, this is going to be your aha moment. Can I just go ahead and say it? A few years back, I read a book by an author by the name of David Smith, and the title of the book is called Less Than Human. And the subtitle of the book is Why We Demean, Enslave, and Exterminate Others. Fascinating, isn't it? The question he poses in the book is this: what is it that actually enables one group of human beings to treat another group as though they were subhuman creatures? Subhuman, right? That thing that makes us, it lacks that thing that makes us human, I guess. How can I remove your humanness so that I can mistreat you? He actually points out that we know it's wrong to kill a person, but we think it's permissible to actually exterminate a rat. which is why he connects the dots for us to say that to all of the Nazis, the Jews and the Gypsies, the others, all of them were rats. They were disease-carrying rats. They're dangerous. We got to get rid of them. In a case study of the Japanese capturing Nanjing in the late 1930s, they labeled their enemies as demons and devils and monsters. He quotes a Japanese veteran who says, "We called the Chinese this word that meant below human, like bugs or animals." That the Chinese didn't belong to the human race. That was the way we looked at it. Listen to this. He goes on to describe how he was ordered to bayonet unarmed Chinese civilians and what it was that enabled him to comply with his order. Here's a quote. "If I'd thought of them as human beings, I couldn't have done it. But I thought of them as animals or below human beings." Think about how this works in marriage. Not yours, someone else's. A marriage counselor who's really an expert in relationships, a guy by the name of John Gottman, says that contempt, okay, is the #1 predictor of divorce in a marriage. That if one person, or actually both of the partners in the marriage relationship, show contempt, he says it's the most important sign that that marriage is in trouble. In other words, he just says this, that when you treat each other with disrespect, when you come with really strong sarcasm, when you have condescension in the relationship, name-calling, mimicking, eye-rolling, all things he includes in contempt, sneering, okay? I mean, I just can't wrap my head around some of the things I have heard one married person say to another married person in public. It conveys disgust and superiority. Contempt, simply put, says, I'm better than you. I'm better than you. And you are lesser than me. And so you have these long, simmering, like negative kinds of thoughts about another person, not just another person, the person that you're married to, and then it rises up in an attack of someone's sense of self-worth. And if you do not move towards reconciliation, then we move towards more and more conflict. Let me give you a really, really mild example, okay? If you are part of a marriage, you're the person in your marriage who's quite punctual. We're not even going to go for a show of hands, all right? You're punctual. You're the one, you're always on time. You're even early, right? If we're on time, we're late, that's you. And your spouse has a difficult time being ready. We're not doing a show of hands. We're not looking at anybody. They're not ready when it's time to go. It goes like this, okay? Hey, I learned to tell time when I was 5 years old. When are you going to learn? You think about the language that we use, or the language that we're allowing in something like music. And I'm not going to say the words. We had a long conversation about this at my house last night on whether I'm allowed to say the B word, the W word, the S word, any of that kind of thing. I voted that I should be allowed to, so I could correctly convey it to you, but some of you didn't check your kids in today, so. Those labels are expressions of contempt. When I play basketball, every time I hear someone on the court, for example, make a bad decision, they're responsible. Their skills impeded their own way. You intercepted a pass. I threw it out of bounds. When they say the F word in anger, can I say that? I don't know if I'm supposed to say it. When they say the F word in anger, it tells me something about how that person feels about that sexual act. Anger and contempt. You impeded me. Okay, that's what we're talking about. I didn't get what I want. I got long, simmering, negative thoughts. Those words are degrading, right? I form an attack then on your sense of self-worth. And we say things and we behave in ways that are designed to push people away. Okay, I got to get you out there. Move them to the outside, place them in isolation. We don't want you here. This is how it works in abusive situations, by the way. Just play it out to its end. My anger led me to contempt, which led me to respond in a physical way. Why? Because you don't have self-worth, and I'm going to place you in isolation. I'll actually treat you as if you're nothing, because you are nothing. See, so many of the things that are coming next in this teaching, hey, this is the introduction. because this is a setup for everything that comes after. But so many of the things that are coming next are connected to this, because next week we're going to talk about adultery/lust, which goes like this. I was frustrated in this relationship. I was angry about the unmet expectations. I was really, really ticked off about what you did to me. And so then we redefined our spouse as someone different. And the things that we say to each other, right? The names and the knockdown, and we demean and we insult and we belittle. You know what? It's hard to cheat on a cherished bride. But someone might cheat on an egotistical jerk. I was lonely, unhappy, that's just a body and an unknown person and an object. That's not someone's daughter or let alone a child of God. It's just a thing. That's how it happens. Next week, can't wait for you to come back. And I assigned this one to Allison, by the way. It's amazing. All right. Now, some of us understand this. We got to wrap up. Some of us understand this because we've been on the other side of that, haven't we? Like it was our dad, and he didn't know he was angry. He didn't know that's what that was, right? He never dealt with it, and he pushed us away by being competitive. He always had to be better than us, didn't he? Or comparing, or worse yet, he actually said those words, I wish you had never been born. And we ran into it, or it spilled on us from some other person, right? And someone launched at us intentionally, and it picked apart one of our deepest needs, didn't it? That need to belong. And that deep need is now harmed, and we got pushed out, and we got downgraded, and we got labeled, and they spit on us, and some of us have been hurt so badly that murder might be seen as a mercy for us. And Jesus singled people out for the highest penalty, because when you do that to someone else, you're guilty of killing a soul. Contempt, right? A form of anger that makes it easier for us to hurt them. Okay, I wish this was a conclusion, but Jesus isn't done yet. One more thing. Verse 22, whoever says, you fool, will be subject to hellfire. And let me just kind of say it again. One of the things we have missed periodically in the translation of the scriptures and in our explanation and understanding within the church is to correctly convey the power of certain words or concepts. And in so doing, unfortunately, what happens is they lose some of their effectiveness, the wow factor, if you will. And I promised my wife I'd keep it PG, but just so you know that there's really no acceptable way to translate fool without being offensive or crass. So here's what I offer to you on the screen. This is what it means, right there. The best way to understand it in our modern English world is more than just calling someone an idiot. You're going to have to preface it with a very juicy adjective, okay? Active participle plus jerk or idiot. Anger, okay? That kind of anger actually leads to contempt that leads to fool, which is malice. It's what happens when we say, okay, I don't even care what happens to you. You messed up the project, fool. You cut me off, fool. I hope something bad happens to you because you probably deserve it. And you're number one, by the way, if you guys know what I mean. I get angry, right, and I want to make someone pay, and I can't do what I want. I can't do to you, so I'm going to redefine you and who you are and how God sees you. Jesus says that is such a violation on a person's worth, it's an assault on their soul, that the punishment would justify hellfire. He's referring to a point outside of town where they would take all of their garbage, right? They would have this dump that they would set on fire. It's a place that shows up in the New Testament called Gehenna. It represents all of the stuff that you don't want anymore. And he says, when you treat a person as if you'd rather they not exist at all and you wouldn't care in the least bit, right? That when you begin to treat people differently than the value God has placed on them, you're in very serious danger because you yourself, Jesus says, are going to end up being thrown out into the burning garbage trash like that. Anger and contempt have a way of backfiring on you, which is why some of the most miserable and lonely and regret-filled people that you know in your life, and some of you, you're just angry people. You're just angry. And Jesus is connecting all of the dots for us to say that murder is the ultimate step on a road that's paved with the stones of anger and contempt. It's unresolved, it's repressed, it's held onto, it's growing, it's festering. Go back far enough, okay? Just take it back. Go back far enough, you'll find unresolved anger of the murderer that eventually exploded and someone dies. And it was physical. But we're also talking about emotional. You just got murdered. You know what this feels like. You're still here, but someone tried to end your life. They killed you with a look. They killed you with a word. They murdered you with an accusation. Now listen again. Jesus is not handing out new laws to say, oh, at the end of it, the takeaway should be stop using bad words. That's not what he's talking about. Don't get mad or you're going to hell. That's not what Jesus is saying. He's saying it is just simply not possible for a person to live with an attitude like this towards people and be in harmony with the kingdom of Jesus. Because remember what we're going for, dike asune, we're going for righteousness, that no one can be right in this kingdom without heart transformation. See, it's not Jesus giving us another list of things that we need to do and not do. Hey, well, I didn't kill anyone today. I haven't expressed contempt today. So far, I haven't called anyone a stupid, whatever the word is. We did not end up in the kingdom of Jesus to just give the minimum. Well, I don't think I hate you. No, but we are fully transformed, and we'll get here in a couple of weeks when we can move to, I love you. We're not ready for that yet, but we're going to get there as Jesus takes us deeper into the kind of people that we can be as kingdom citizens. You didn't murder anyone, I get it, but you wanted to. What was happening in your heart that made you feel that anger? We'll see this in the next week as well. Okay, so you didn't actually follow through and commit adultery, but you thought about it, and you fantasized about it, and you undressed her in your mind, and you went over all of the details. The only thing you didn't actually do was actually have sex. But what was happening in your heart that made you go through that process? Okay, you've been there, some of us. Mistreated, wounded, we're on this side, we're hurt, we're devastated, life was taken. That's some of us. And we got these people over here going, well, I'm on the good side and I was right, so I can do this, what I'm about ready to do. I was angry and you showed them, didn't you? And now you have regret because it didn't work out the way you thought it was going to work out. There were consequences and it didn't help anything at all. I want to appeal to some of you today to consider a possible step, and then we'll wrap up, okay? I want you to consider possibly stepping into a short-term group called Life's Healing Choices. And you can actually find it on your program if you got one. If not, go to our website or jump on the app, Life's Healing Choices. Check out the group. If you've been hurt by someone, if you hurt other people, if you hurt yourself, right, you can find some healing and you can experience freedom and life change. I want you to check that out. So here's how I think I'd like to end. I'm going to ask you to stand. Can we do that? And I'm going to appeal to two groups of us. And we're gonna sing something to seal this moment, okay? Here it is. No show of hands, but I'm gonna pray for you. Some of you are on the receiving end of what we've just talked about, of being hurt. You've been hurt, right? Your spirit was killed, essentially. Someone made an assault on your self-worth. Here's what you cannot do. You cannot deal with it by ignoring it. You cannot deal with it by saying, oh, it's okay, or maybe I deserved it, or I'll just manage it. You can't do that. The only way to actually deal with it is for someone, and unfortunately it's going to have to be you, to stop the cycle, right? To stop the anger and the relationship murdering, and that's called forgiveness. And that's a really, really big step for us. But here's the question I would just throw at you today. Am I willing to trust God to handle and deal with what has attacked me or who has attacked me? Because non-forgiveness ends up becoming a choice to actually keep the wound open and let it fester, and when it does, eventually you become the murderer for someone else when your anger comes out all over them. So here's what I would just simply ask you to do with the few seconds that we have. Could you bring all of that experience, all of that pain, all of that hurt, and all of that loss into the kingdom of Jesus and let the King transform your heart today? Because then there's the other group of us, right? You're the angry one. You're the one who's hurting people. And let's go back to our definition of murder, right? That no one but God has the right or the authority to decide when a person lives or dies? Have you deliberately taken that from someone? It's because of your anger, right, or your contempt or malice that you killed someone, like we said, with a look, or your words actually destroyed a life, or your anger pushed someone so far away and caused so much damage and hurt and a distraction to who they are and their worth that you essentially ended their life. See, you can't deal with this by trying harder. It doesn't work to just count to 10. Or say, you know what, sorry, I can't help it, that's just who I am. What you need to do, and I know we only have a few seconds today, but you need to work on it. You need to actually do what Jesus says is repent. You got to stop what you're doing, turn around and go the opposite direction, the direction towards Jesus and the life in his kingdom. And again, you do the same thing. You bring all of that stuff and who you are into the kingdom of Jesus, and you let the King change your heart from the inside out. Look, we're going to say it every week. There's 2 deals on the table. You take deal number 1 that says, I'm not going to look at it. I'm going to keep letting it flow. I'm going to keep destroying, killing, devastating my kids, lose my marriage, be out of control, and just beat up everyone that I see and just let it play out. The other deal, and the one I would strongly encourage us to take today, is to say, I want something better. I want something different. I want the dikaiosune. I want the good. I want the righteousness of Jesus in me. Jesus living in me, doing a transformative work, okay, so that he's king of my heart. He's king of my heart. And we're going to pray to that end today. God, today we're going to say thank you for Jesus. God, we're going to ask you to come and do this work in us today. God, we're going to ask you to come in there and to do some assessment in this moment. God, help us take a hard look at the kinds of things that we have in our heart. God, it may be hurt. God, it may be pain, it may be loss. God, it may be what someone else has done to us today. That God, let us offer that up to you in this moment to receive the healing that you have for us. God, we ask you to fill us with your goodness, with your righteousness, so we can truly live this life as the good people who are a part of your kingdom. And we pray this through Jesus. Amen.
We sing, I believe, and I believe you're my healer. I believe you are all I need. Yeah. Oh, sing, I believe you're my portion, and I believe, oh, you're my portion. Yes, I believe, and I believe you're more than enough for me. Yes, you are. Oh, Jesus, you're all I need, and I believe, oh, you're my healer, and I believe that you are all I need. Yeah. Yes, I believe you're my portion. We lift it up, and I believe that you're my portion, and I believe you're more than enough for me. Jesus, you're all, yes, you know, and nothing is impossible for you. Nothing is impossible. Oh, nothing is impossible for you. Yeah, you hold my world. Come on, can we lift our hands this morning as we sing? Nothing is. Oh, nothing is impossible for you. Nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible for you. Oh, you hold my world. Sing, I believe. last time we sing, I believe. And I believe that you're my healer. And I believe you are all I need. Jesus, you're more than enough. And I believe that you're my portion. And I believe you're more than enough for me. Jesus, you're all I need.
Boy, I hope I make it through this sermon. This is good stuff. And challenging, it's true, and it'll change your life. So, some of you are a little nervous about what's next week going to look like. Don't be nervous about that. Hey, we're, as well as when we go to the one after that, divorce. And I said it last week, look, we're talking about what do we do from this day forward. We're not going to go back, and I think you'll find a lot of healing in the next few weeks, okay? Hey, as we leave here today, just a reminder, you might want to check out that group. If you are a guest today, we'd love to meet you down at the end of the hallway in Connection Point just for a few minutes. Hey, let's go out this week asking Jesus to be the king of our heart and truly revolutionize our community with the way that we treat people. So, have a great rest of your day. We'll see you next week.
Spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. Oh, you have been so kind to me.
mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me.
Whatever the question, the answer is Jesus. No need to worry, no, no. The answer is Jesus. Oh, whatever the question, yeah. The answer is Jesus. No need to worry, no, no. The answer is Jesus. Oh, Jesus, you give me life, my life's in your hand. Whatever comes next, no, I won't be afraid. You stand beside me wherever I am. You hear me call when I call on your name. The answer is Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. The answer is Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. The answer is Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. The answer is Jesus. You hold the future. Oh, you've already been there. So Lord, I will follow. Yeah. With hope for tomorrow. For tomorrow. You give me life, my life's in your hand. Whatever comes next, no, I won't be afraid. You stand beside me wherever I am. You hear me call when I call on your name. The answer is Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. The answer is Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. The answer is Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. The answer is Jesus, Jesus. In every season, you are the reason. I'll say yes, Lord, to you, Jesus. No hesitation in my tribulation. The answer is Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. The answer is Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. The answer is Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. The answer is Jesus, Jesus. The answer for the world is Jesus. Oh. You're a man of your word, yeah.
I don't need the smoke of mirrors, 'cause I know there's a God who's real. I don't need the lights to fool me, 'cause I have seen the God who heals. I know when I ask, I'll receive it, 'cause you're not a God who withholds. I hear you say, just believe me.